Hello and welcome to Gardening at 58 North. So this video is kind of an update video, a repotting video and a minor pruning video as well, all combined into one. So this is my bonsai larch. I've done several update videos in the past. I've just been getting this nice shape on it, getting it into a nice kind of form. Now this pot is getting a little bit too small for it, so I would like to get into a slightly larger pot. But also last winter we had some hard frosts and the pot has actually kind of exploded. It's covered in cracks, the whole thing's not salvageable, so I need to get rid of the old pot and put it into a new one. Now one sign that it definitely needs repotting is the growth it put on last year was very short. In previous years it grew probably 10-20 centimeters on each branch and it had long leggy growth. This year it was nice and compact, which actually has helped with the form, and I've been really happy with how the branching has occurred. But I feel like if I keep it in a smaller pot, it's going to stay really small, and I would like to get this into a larger bonsai. All my bonsais are quite small because all my other bonsais are tropical plants, they need to stay in the house constantly, whereas this is a hardy plant. This is a larch, it's used to mountainous climates, it's used to very cold winters, so it needs to be outside all the time in cooler weather. This one I can actually allow to get quite a lot bigger. I quite like the idea of quite a large looking bonsai, so I'm actually going to be giving it a much bigger pot. Now it's probably a little bit too big, so I might have to do a bit of root pruning every now and again to make sure it doesn't start spiraling around the bottom. But this is the size of the new pot. It's probably about 4 times the size of the last one. Normally I like to go for terracotta pots. I think they look nicer. Also they're heavy so they don't blow over as easily in the wind. But I wasn't able to source one the right size. I couldn't find any shops in my area and there doesn't really seem to be much online, so I've had to go for a plastic one, but it is a bonsai style pot. It doesn't look quite as nice, but at least it's got a decent size for this to grow quite a bit taller. So I'll give you a close up now and show you how the growth has been. So in the last video it was spring and I think it was just starting to come into flower. You can see that it has set a few nice cones. I quite like the cones on larch because they're so small, it really fits in well with the bonsai theme. The problem with a lot of the other conifers that grow cones is they tend to be quite a lot larger, and so they don't really fit in with the scale of the plant. But these cones are really small and so they look really nice there on the plant. It really does add something to the look of the plant. And then I think I said in the last video I had to cut off the leader. But I've managed to regrow a new one, and I'll probably extend this a bit taller. I was keeping it at that height because in previous years it had kept putting on lots of growth at the top, so I had to keep cutting that back hard. This year it hasn't, well this previous year it hadn't grown too much, so I will actually encourage it to grow further at the top now. I'll have to see which one becomes the leader. One of these should take off. And also over the last winter there hasn't been too much dieback. It's a shame this has died though. That was a really nice branch. It really helped with the symmetrical appearance, so it's a real shame that one's gone. But otherwise all the other branches looking pretty good at the moment. Very minimal dieback on any of them, so I'm happy with that. And I'll show you the growth that it had last year. So like you can see, these side branches, they've come out and it's had 3 new side branches off the side branch. So that's fantastic. It's starting to look really nice now with that kind of branching habit. Same with some of these down here. Lots of beautiful side branches. Basically in the last video update what I did is I cut back all these stems to take off the leading shoot, and that just encouraged all these side shoots to grow into side branches, and that's worked really well. So I'm quite happy with how it is, and because it didn't grow much last summer I don't really think I need to do much pruning, if any, this year. So I think I might actually keep some of these dead branches because I think it adds to like a more aged tree kind of look. In the wild when trees get really old and mature they often have dead branches, so this year I'm actually going to keep the dead branches just because I think that might add to the character. And looking at the other structure of the plant, what I'm going for is a mature form of larch where eventually it will have a clear stem at the bottom and then it'll be a bit wider in the middle and then narrows at the top, a bit like a pyramid shape, but just a very gradual pyramid shape. Larch trees tend to be quite tall, slender trees, and the reason I'm keeping the branches here at the bottom is because I'd like to get a thickening on the trunk. If I cleared all the stems off to this height, what would happen is from here downwards wouldn't thicken any more than here upwards really. So basically every point where a stem attaches from that point down is a little bit thicker. So letting these grow longer than the rest has allowed this slight tapering to appear on the plant. Now unfortunately the tapering kind of tails off a bit and you can see it gets a bit truncated here. I need to get some more tapering back, but as I allow this to grow bigger I should be able to grow that out and I get a nicer taper again. So I'm quite happy with how it's been, and there was a lovely layer of moss that had grown over it. It did look really nice, and then a few weeks ago the birds started nesting and they've just pecked out all of the moss, so it looks a bit ugly at the moment, but it did look quite nice before. And when it comes to the pot, you can see here it's cracked all over the whole thing. It's just falling apart, you can see there. So what I'm going to do is take it out of its pot, have a good look at the root system. I'll probably need to do a little bit of root pruning, and now is the perfect time of year to do it. Basically with larch trees and most deciduous plants, in winter time it goes dormant and it pulls all its energy and nutrients out of the leaves and into the roots and the stems of the plant. So a lot of the nutrients are stored up in the roots over the winter time. Then just as it starts to come into leaf, it puts all that energy that's stored in its roots into the new leaves. So now's the perfect time to do a bit of root pruning, because those roots have transferred most of their energy up into the new shoots, and you've got all the energy now in the leaf tips or the needle tips on this. What that means is when I take off the roots, it won't suffer as much because I'm not taking away too much of the stored energy reserves. So now's a perfect time to do that. If I left it a bit longer and the needles were fully formed, that would cause another issue. There wouldn't be enough roots to support the growth of the needles, and what would happen is they would dry out too quickly. The water couldn't be absorbed fast enough by the plant because it doesn't have enough roots, and the plant would really suffer. But at this stage, the needles aren't fully established, aren't fully grown, so they're not going to need much water at the moment, and so the roots can recover by the time the needles are fully formed, and so it won't dry out too quickly. So if I did this a bit later on in the season, there'd be a bit of a shock from the plant because the roots wouldn't be balancing the size of the leaves, or the needles in this case. But if I did it too early, then I'll be taking off a lot of the energy reserves from the roots before it's transferred up. So I'm now going to start taking it out of the pot. Normally this is a bit of a tricky process because with these pots there's often a bit of a lip on them and it can be hard to take out, but this year is going to be very easy because the pot has completely fallen apart. This should come out relatively easily because it's, as I say, it's all cracked and falling apart anyway. So I'll just carefully tease it out. There we are, that's the, as you can see, the pot has cracked all over the place. It is a frost resistant pot, but I think what happened is the soil expanded and pushed against the pot and broke it. We had -15 the year before and there wasn't any problem, the pot survived no problem, maybe because the soil was a bit drier. This year we had -6 and for some reason the pot has exploded. So either the pot has been aging, or I think maybe it was just a bit wetter this winter and that's caused an issue. So this is what we've got here. As you can see, it's a very thin root plate. The roots themselves aren't looking at their best, unfortunately. There's a lot of brown kind of dead roots in there. Some of them are alive, but there is some new growth coming. You can see on this section at the bottom here and also down there is a bit of new growth, so it should be alright. So what I'm going to do is carefully tease out some of the old roots. I'm also going to take off any wires that might still be in there. I think I had previously taken most of the wires out though, but there might be 1 or 2 left. I'm just going to carefully tease this out, remove some of the moss as well so we can see more of the stem and the roots and what we're working with, and then I'll see what needs pruning. So it is actually very tough and it's not teasing out very easily. You can see basically it was very pot bound and it was spiralling around the pot, even though I did do root pruning last year. So I'm going to do some more root pruning again this year. I'm just going to get some old secateurs, trim off some of the spiraling roots, and then I should be able to tease out the other ones just a little bit easier. And the good thing with root pruning is it takes off some of those thicker roots which aren't feeder roots, and it causes smaller side roots to grow, and so you actually get a much healthier plant if you don't have loads of these roots, especially when there's lots of them like this. They're not growing in soil, they're just roots next to roots. They can't really absorb any nutrients because they're just surrounded by themselves, so they need to be surrounded by soil. So removing a lot of the old roots will really help, and it will help again as I am putting it into new compost. So I've removed a lot of the older roots and the ones that are kind of spiraling around. What I've left with now is quite a nice root plate. Now if I had the right tools, what I should probably do is get a bonsai comb or bonsai rake and kind of rake out the roots, get them to come out more of a radial pattern instead of spiraling round, coming out of straight lines. I don't have a bonsai rake unfortunately, but I will try and rake out what I can with my fingers, and so that should be quite good now. There's not any really large roots. You want to remove any large roots, you just want lots of fine feeder roots. Of course if you find the main root and it's the main root for the whole plant, you don't want to remove that. Any large roots on the edges, definitely take them out, and this one hasn't had any because I have actually been root pruning this almost every single year. You can actually see an old cut mark there from one I cut last year, and also one here, so it's looking quite good. So what I'm going to do now is put it in this new pot. So as I say, this is the pot I'm going for. It's certainly quite a lot larger It'll just be sitting in the middle like that, so give it plenty more space for its roots to grow. And I would expect it to grow much faster this year, so I just have to be careful. I might have to do a bit of extra pruning in the summer because of all the extra growth it's going to have. Now when it first starts growing, it's going to be a little bit slow because I've just taken a lot of the roots off. It's going to be disturbed. What it's going to do is it's going to focus on growing lots of new roots at the beginning of summer, and then into the mid to late summer I should expect lots of growth and quite a lot of growth coming on it, so I need to start wiring that growth in and also trimming off the unnecessary growth. And the soil I'm using for this is basically just a loam-based compost, or also known as a soil-based compost. So this is nice and heavy, so it should stop it from toppling over, especially as this pot isn't terracotta, it's lighter than the other pot. Although the size of it, the plant will be fine for the next year or two, but I'd like to have some heavier soil from when the plant gets larger. And it also holds quite a bit of moisture, this soil. There is quite a lot of organic matter as well, so it should grow well. Now this is a little bit of a rich mix, so I probably won't be feeding it this year. There's already feed added to this compost, and I'll just need to watch. If it does grow too much, I'll just have to make sure I prune it regularly throughout the summer just to keep it under control. But as I'm trying to size up the plant, I'm not too worried with a bit of extra growth. So I'm just going to check the height of the plant, a little bit higher with the compost. I like to have that bit of root and stem just slightly proud of the soil. I quite like the look of the old roots kind of tangled around there. So height wise I think that's about right. So what I'm going to do is now just fill it in with the soil. So I'm also just going to gently firm down the compost, make sure it's secure, because with bonsais they have very small root systems compared with the amount of growth in the top half. They can get quite wobbly, so I could have wired this in, but I think with it being such a big pot and without taking a huge amount off the roots, it should be okay. Also for the next few weeks I'll be putting this in a very sheltered environment to protect it, so I won't be expecting this to get any wind until later once the roots have actually established again. So that's my Larch Bonsai now repotted into its new pot. So I'm going to put this in a very sheltered location. The problem is if it gets really warm, or if it gets a lot of sunshine or a lot of wind, it will dry out quite quickly. It will go into growth really fast. It will grow lots of top growth, lots of new needles will grow, and if the roots haven't established in time, it's too windy or too warm, it will dry out and the plant could die or just suffer and start losing a few limbs. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put it in a shady location, away from direct sunshine, someone that's really sheltered so it doesn't get a lot of wind either, but it will be outside so that it's cold and it gets the normal spring-like conditions. Larch, after all, is a mountainous tree. It's used to snow and lots of cold weather in spring, so even when the needles start to come through, it's not that unusual for a bit of frost or anything to come, as long as it's not a really hard frost. So keep it outside, cold, in shade and out of the wind, and then once its needles are fully formed and it's looking quite healthy and starting to put new growth on, I'll know that the roots have established, and then I can put it in its usual position, which is just a sunny open location with plenty of good airflow. Because these are mountainous trees, they like a lot of good airflow, a lot of wind and breeze, as long as it's not going to blow them over. So I'll put them in that location and it should green up quite nicely. Now I haven't seen any flowers this year. Last year it flowered, as I say. This year I haven't noticed any, so I don't think we'll be getting any new cones, but we've still got those existing cones on the top. And because it's got this much bigger pot, it probably won't flower next year either, because it will go back into more of a juvenile stage with strong growth instead of a mature stage with cones and flowering. So we'll see how it does. I'll probably give you guys an update either late summer or it might be another year's time when it comes to the next root pruning and maybe a bit of wiring in as well. But that's all for this video. I expected it to have a bit more pruning and a bit more wiring, but actually the structure is so nice this year I'm not going to touch it. And as I say, those lower branches eventually they will be cut off. I just need them to stay there for now to get a bit more thickening on the bottom of the trunk and a bit nicer taper. So that's all for this video, and I'll see you guys in a few months or maybe a year when it's time to do a bit more work on this bonsai.